Welcome in, everybody, to a Tuesday morning edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. I'm your host, Zander Krause. That's my co-host, Johnny Mack, John McMullen. Another day in the offseason, John, and today we're filled with news, brother, for the Philadelphia Eagles, from Nick Sirianni to Joe Douglas to the Tush push. We'll talk about it all today. How you doing on this Tuesday morning, John?
Yeah, big day in the offseason. You get the extension, which we all knew what was coming, just didn't know when it was coming. And that is here with Nick Sirianni. Joe Douglas back after an unsuccessful stint as a GM, if you're going to be real about it, with the New York Jets. But it's not easy to be a GM with the New York Jets. Great personnel guy. You know, one of the key hires to get the Eagles up to where they are really right now. If you think about Super Bowl 52 through this Super Bowl championship, Joe was leading the personnel department, building that roster for Super Bowl 52. So just from a pure scouting standpoint, big deal to have him back. And then the Tush push, the vote will come most likely on Wednesday. Unfortunately, I was hoping it was today so he could get it over with. And I say should be, because if they don't have the votes, they won't take a vote and they'll table it again. So we should have at least confirmation for this year. And as expected, they reworked the rule to make it a far broader version. I thought it was a mistake to word it the way that they worded it originally. Now it's been reworked to be a far broader thing. As I've explained, no pushing or pulling runner in any direction of any time. So not only one play, you're removing pushing from the entire game. That's the new thing they're going to be voting on, most likely. So a lot different, and this is what it should have been to begin with.
Feels big, though, John. Do you wonder if they should have made that at the line of scrimmage or something like that, or do you like the proposal to go pushing as a whole?
No,
I did see this dub video somebody put out of all these great NFL plays, and it's like, with the new rule, none of these plays would have been allowed. There's like Adrian Peterson in there. There's all sorts of great plays. Now, I'm not advocating for one way or the other. I'm just looking for your opinion on it.
I've said it consistently. Like, no offense to these people, but they have no fucking idea what went on before 2005. From 1920 to 2005, this was the rule. The current that they're losing their minds over has been in existence for 20 years, 19 years. Unfortunately for old people like me, and the game was much more aesthetically pleasing when there was no pushing involved, and it was fine. Nobody had an issue with it. So this, oh my God, it was that way far, far longer than it was what you think it is right now. And I'm not picking on you. I'm talking about the people that go down that route. They have no idea of the history of the game. Why they took it out in 2005, they claimed it was too difficult to officiate. They're scared of their own shadows. Coming off the Bush push in the college level, it was even more stupid. It's a stupid rule. It should have been removed years ago. It has nothing to do with the Philadelphia Eagles. The only reason it got mixed up with the Philadelphia Eagles is because of the wording of the rule that the Green Bay Packers put forth, which was about eliminating just essentially one play and not pushing from the game, which is what Roger Goodell wants removed from the game. Shouldn't be in the game. Don't like it from the defense's perspective. I said they do too much to hamper the defense in this league. So anything that's going to aid the defense, I'm going to generally support, because they get screwed left and right. Yeah, I've said they should have never changed the rule in 2005. I've been on this for many, many years. And they should remove pushing from the game. Offensive pushing from the game. They should.
Yep. We'll
Um,
come down tomorrow.
Eventually they will. I've said it pretty consistently. But for people that watch this show, it has gone exactly as I said it was going to go. Now,
yeah, I did chuckle when the amendment came out late last night. It was like 6 or 7 o'clock last night. We finally saw the amendment to the proposal from Green Bay.
Yeah, I mean, it was never going to pass. As I also said, the way it was worded by Green Bay, because you are singling out one team. Now they're not. Now they're just trying to remove pushing from the game, which is what Roger Goodell wanted originally. Now, I don't know why it gets other teams involved. That I can't answer. Because that mucks up the works. Because you got all these fans, Green Bay soft, they don't know anything about what's going on. No offense. It's like you can go back. The job of the league is different than the job of the Philadelphia Eagles. You can go back to Bob Gibson with the St. Louis Cardinals in baseball when they lowered the pitching mound. They didn't do it because they hated Bob Gibson or the St. Louis Cardinals. They did it because the game was getting too boring, because he was too dominant and he was the best. There were other pitchers as well. So they had to lower the pitching mound to make it easier for the hitters, to make the game more aesthetically pleasing. That's the job of the league. Will Chamberlain. There's so many damn rules changed because of Will Chamberlain's dominance. They didn't hate Will Chamberlain. They didn't hate the Philadelphia Warriors at the time. They had to widen the lane. They had to offensive goaltending didn't exist before Will Chamberlain. This people don't even believe this. He was not a good free throw shooter, but he was a great athlete. So what he would do is run up from the free throw line and sort of just lay it in, jump and lay it in, because he was so big and so athletic. He really did.
It's a good point though of what you're doing, where things create change in the game.
Yeah, I mean, so the league's process is, look, they don't want to play in the game. No, they don't. They don't. Part of it has to do with Frankie Louvu and the NFC Championship game.
I think that's a big part of it. It's the TV, John, in my opinion, right? It's the TV, man. The TV's where they're making all their money. They got a lot of casual fans out there, not people who are watching Birds 365 all through the summer, and they want to make the best TV possible for them.
And, I'm with people when they put out these proposals, and some of the guys sent out, some of the national guys, and they sent out the actual proposal, and you can see it, which in years past you could never see these things. So they have the wording of the proposal, they have the effects of what they believe the proposal will do, and then they have a reason why they want to change the rule. And anytime I see player safety, I'm with you. I roll my eyes. I hate when they do that. It's bullshit. They don't care about player safety. I'm with you 100%. So that part of it, yeah. I mean, they're hypocritical. They use it when they want to. They use it, you can get hurt at any time in this game. Nobody cares in real life, unfortunately. And then pace of play is legitimate because, as we just said, with Frankie Louvu and guys, and people could get mad at Frankie Louvu. Look, he's trying to guess the snap count because that's the only way you can stop it. So I mean, he's trying to do what's best for his team, and if you're going to run it 15 times and he's going to jump offside, he's going to try to guess it again and again and again. So guess what? That affects the pace of play. But it's not about disliking the Philadelphia Eagles. It is not. I'm sorry. There's a
Well,
bunch of other stuff going on about, seeding and stuff like that. That's not about the Minnesota Vikings. If you go back to the change of the overtime rules, it's not about the Buffalo Bills. And those are bad rule changes in my estimation. It's not that I agree with the league all the time, far from it. Those are bad rule changes. And you've already seen the unintended consequences of the overtime rules. They've had to change them again because they shouldn't have touched them, but they're worried about people complaining.
Perhaps too worried about people complaining.
Oh, yeah. But then our guy, our stat guy, Jeff Kerr, a shout out to him because he put him up again. The Eagles are going to be fine. They had a 100% success rate on the quarterback sneak in 2017. They had a 91.9% conversion rate in 2021, which was Jalen Hurts' first year as a starter before they used it. From 22 to 24, 91.3%. They actually went down. Now, did they use it more? Yes. But, then there's that mentality. 0.27% of plays. People are out there. I saw one guy reply to poor Jeff. Well, they're going to use it. I guarantee they're going to use it 100 times less than they did last year. What are they going to use it? Negative 53 times? How much do you think they run this thing?
No, I mean it is a critical play though. So, at least it has been for this team. But I'm not saying you and Jeff are wrong. I think you guys are going to be right. They're going to be good with it. John, we'll come back to this. I do want to touch on it, but I do want to keep this opening segment. I do want to hit on Sirianni and Joe Douglas as well. We mentioned them in the open. Let's start with Nick Sirianni, John. The big new contract for Nick Sirianni. Your thoughts here on Birds 365, and we'll dive into some of the questions that I have about it. But just your initial thoughts on Nick Sirianni getting the deal, the expected deal that we thought would get done this year has officially landed.
Yeah, I mean, had a ton of leverage, man. Winning the Super Bowl, third highest winning percentage in the modern era. Only John Madden and George Allen are higher, and you got to go back to the 70s for that. In the modern era, is the winningest coach in NFL history. Is the only coach to make the postseason 4 consecutive times, make the Super Bowl twice, and win one. No other coach has done that in the modern era. Like, his resume is historic. So, what it ends up, and somebody will get the number eventually. I can't imagine it will be less than Sean Payton, who's number 2. Could they have talked him in a little bit under Andy Reid? Potentially, because of Andy's history. And he's been around so long. But I mean, this guy deserves everything he's getting. But it comes at a cost, and that cost is, and Jeffrey Lurie even said it and I wrote about this on Sports Illustrated, in his statement when they announced the extension, sustained success. That's it now. That's the goal. Yep. And that's what happened to Doug Peterson. Couldn't sustain the success. And
I also think Doug also had some other issues in terms of wanting more. Nick seems to, John, work well in the sandbox that they've created for him. Doesn't seem like he's asking for much more than they're willing to give him versus Doug, did want more things.
Well, things worked out. Remember, Nick wasn't happy last year. He wasn't happy. Did he go along? Yeah, of course.
And you said that at the time. You said he's more politically savvy, and you're right about that. Yeah,
he is more politically savvy, but we don't know, but because it worked. But if you can imagine a world where they lost in the first round of the playoffs again, he might have gotten fired considering the regular season they had. So if they
Right.
lose in the divisional round, or that, and if they lose in the wild card round, it would have been on the table. I don't think he should have been fired, but it would have been on the table. And now, everything falls into place. You win the Super Bowl. And now there's that, Doug called it the new normal. That's the goal. Be New England, be Kansas City, the new normal. And those expectations are there. So now, if one of those years happens, like 2023, all of a sudden, then you have Howie and Jeffrey who think they're responsible for a lot of this. And they are. I'm
Yeah,
not
they
saying
are.
they're not. They're big parts of this, saying, well, do we really need to pay a coach $20 million when we can get similar results for 7, 8, 9 at that point?
This is where I think they got to find the gray area, though, John. Like, you don't want to get, let your ego get too big, and then you make the wrong decision because you thought that,
Yeah, well, and I think they're completely wrong. But by the way, for those thinking, I'm just pointing out things,
I don't know if they're completely wrong. I mean, I think I do think Nick is the right coach for this team. But look, they could point to the last 2 coaches and say we've had the best 8-year run in Eagles history. 2 different coaches. The front office stayed the same.
They
We built 2
can,
different
but
rosters, 2 different quarterbacks. Like, they've done a lot as an organization that would give them that thought process. I would just say don't go too far. And like you just said, just because you gave him a pay raise, now you want to blow him out, because you can get cheaper.
And I'm not
That's
saying,
where I
by
think
the
they go
way,
too far.
I'm saying, look, if he wins, there's no issue whatsoever.
Yeah, right.
And by win, I don't mean win the Super Bowl every year, but win the division, go deep in the playoffs, consistent, sustained success. And there's no problems. And once you get to a point, if it reaches 10 years or something like that, all of a sudden you have a little bit more rope for a bad year. The problem is this game is cyclical, and bad things are going to happen. And it might be injuries, which kind of derailed Doug's last season here, with the offensive line. And all of a sudden, a good team turns into a average team or even a below average team. You saw it at the end of 2023. They looked like a below average team, when they went 1-6 at the end of the season.
Yeah.
And look, you don't have to look back very far to see the kind of heat he was under, even last year when they were 2-2.
It was more than just fans, John. Like we said that yesterday. The owner had questions.
Oh yeah.
Based on I mean,
Jeffrey wanted to go buy a yacht to, take the emotion out of it after that Tampa Bay loss.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember the yachtsman when he went and bought a yacht.
And that was to keep himself, because he was angry. I tell the story about, I always tell the story about going down to Tampa, but in the press box, the Tampa Stadium's an older press box. So, a lot of the Eagles people sit right behind us. Like usually in some of the newer stadiums, they're in the suite or something, or, away from us. They're right behind us in Tampa because it's an older stadium. And watching that game unfold and the ugliness in the second half, and there was pretty high level Eagles exec. That's all I'll describe them as. Right behind me, just let out, this is fucking embarrassing. And that right then I said, oh boy.
Yeah.
So things can turn quickly in the NFL.
Do you think Jeffrey Lurie, perhaps, for as good as he is as an owner, and I do want to give him that credit before I ask this, but do you think he needs to be more even-keeled on stuff like this?
Yes. By no means Nick should not be fired. By no means.
No, I mean, it's funny, John, just real quick. We talk about last 23, and it's like, I know it was ugly, but won 11 games. You know, like it's not like, and again, it was ugly. The way it looked mattered, but 11 games is an up year for half the league, you know?
Oh yeah. It shouldn't have even been considered to fire Nick Sirianni. He shouldn't have had to go yacht shopping to take the emotion out of it. But I mean, the emotion's involved because they do care. And that's part of it. And it's high profile. Look, one of the reasons I think they fell apart is because of overreaction to Sean Desai, who by no means am I saying it was pretty clear he wasn't ready for that job, but you do it the right way. You get through it and then you make a move after the season.
Yeah, that was a weird move, man. 10-2, they made that move. It just didn't make sense to me, you know?
I they were considering it during the bye week when they were 10-1, whatever. I have to look back at the bye
Yeah, I
week,
forget what the bye week was.
which blew my mind when I found that out. And early in the season, people, because there's a lot of revisionist, there always is. There's a lot of revisionist history. Whether you have a good season, there's a lot of revisionist history upward. Forget that the ugly parts, as you see that this year. I mean, everybody acts like the shitty passing game didn't exist because they won. Same thing in a negative fashion. They had some pretty good defensive games early in that season. They really did, especially in the second half.
Yeah.
Considering some of the injuries they went through, revolving door at slot cornerback. But everybody forgets that. And making the move to Matt Patricia is probably the worst decision Nick ever made as a head coach here.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the argument regardless of how bad you thought the side was. When you're sitting at 10-2, you just let it go. I mean, don't make that move now.
Yeah. It made no sense. It was a very bad decision. It was a panic decision. And, I'm sure he learned from it, and that's part of being a coach. But overall, I think it was, and I don't want to pick on Greg Rosenthal, but there's a dichotomy between Nick and Jalen when people talk about the goofy disrespect card, which, again, I don't agree with, because, one pundit is not a group of pundits, or, everybody's got different opinions. But if he happened to come out, worst time ever, didn't know the extension was coming. The top coaches in the NFL. And I think Nick was 15th. I'm like, come on, dude. I'm like, Kevin O'Connell's 4th. I'm like, what the fuck has Kevin O'Connell done? He's a very good coach. Everybody wants to work with him. He's won 14 games. So he's done a lot. But comparatively speaking, I'm like, but he calls plays.
Man, the infatuation with that, John, is crazy. John, I want to take you through one what if scenario. All right, and they're not my favorite to do, but this what if we've talked about a lot. All right, and with the new deal with Nick Sirianni here, coming off of last year where he was on rocky water after the collapse, the season prior, excuse me. If the Eagles lost that Rams game, if Jalen Carter doesn't get home, okay, and you end the game with whatever that was passing yards, and you lose that game and you go home in the divisional round, are we talking about a Nick Sirianni extension right now? And if we are, is it the same size? Or are we talking about a whole different thing where maybe Nick was on the outs? What do you think?
Well, I think it's far more complicated. I don't think he gets fired. I do think he gets an extension, probably smaller extension, certainly less money. Shorter term, probably. And we don't even know. My guess is he got 4 more years. But, in the case if they lose that game, maybe he gets 2 years and certainly less money. But they weren't going to let they're not going to let a head coach go into a season as a lame duck. Too many issues. Players know it. That's what bad organizations do. if adversity always adversity always props up, you can imagine if you're a player, you say, well, this coach is not going to be here anyway. So too many issues. So I think he would have gotten an extension, shorter term, lesser money. And the difference between potential firing, I go back to that Tampa, embarrassing. Losing that game wouldn't have been embarrassing. It would have been close. Jalen Carter didn't get it. The Rams win in the last minute. Would have been very close, nip and tuck. Right. Snow, there's excuses.
I do think it would have brought that passing thing that we talked about being bottom.
Oh yeah, people wouldn't stop talking about the pass. Kellen Moore might have affected.
That's what I mean. Kellen Moore might not even have gotten a head coaching job. This thing might look.
Oh, he wouldn't have. They're not even in the conversation. He wouldn't have. And he might have gotten fired from here because there would have been scapegoats,
right?
At the lower
level. I think, and again, Jeffrey Lurie deserves a lot of credit, but in my estimation, that's too far. Like if you're going to have to scapegoat somebody after every playoff loss because it wasn't as far as you, that's where I think you're going too far. Making the divisional round is a hard thing to do. John, you talk about this all the time. Fans want to win the Super Bowl every year. Every quarterback in the history of the game, take your pick, loses the last game more than they win. There's only 6 games remaining or 4 teams remaining after the divisional round. I think that's too far if you're going to fire a coach every time you might lose a divisional game. That doesn't sound like it's.
No, I'm with you. I've been talking about that for years, back to the Doug Peterson era. That's what they do, and I don't agree with it. And I've said it with Mike Groh. I said it with Press Taylor. I said it with everybody they scapegoat. There's certain guys that Sean was an example of a guy who probably wasn't ready for that job. There's exceptions, but it. And like Kellen Moore, would have gotten fired? I don't know. Potentially, maybe his reputation, maybe the fact that his experience, maybe they would have given him one more chance. But the history is the history. I mean, look, if Nick had his druthers, Kevin Patullo would have been the offensive coordinator last year. But he was forced to go outside the organization,
right,
to get fresh ideas, which ended up as the exact same because you build the offense around the people you have for the most part. A little bit different because people are different, but from a thematic standpoint, very similar. And it should be that way because good coaches will build around the people they have. And Shane was a good coach and Brian was a good coach, whether people believe it or not. And they built the offense around the people they had. So it looked very similar from a thematic standpoint, not talking about success, individual plays. And then you try to grow it. And that's what Kellen tried to do, but he scaled back to what they do well. And that's what he should have done because he's a good coach.
Right.
But, if I don't even know if Nick would have fired Brian Johnson. Maybe he would have because.
Oh, I've said that over and over again. I think the Brian Johnson firing was way overblown. I mean, they acted like he was like the worst coordinator in football when they blew him out.
They always do that.
The top 10 offense.
It's amazing to me. But, and I use Press Taylor is the best example of this. The best example of this. Because now everybody in Philadelphia thinks Press Taylor is the biggest joke in the world. Press Taylor was here before Doug Peterson. He was the golden child of the organization.
Right.
I came in here and everybody's pushing Press Taylor. Oh, this guy's going to be a great coach. This guy's going to be a great coach. This guy's going to be a great coach. And then Doug took a liking to him, probably because he heard the same things I heard. This guy's going to be a great coach. This guy's going to be a great coach. And, kept promoting him and giving him more responsibility to the point he was the de facto offensive coordinator at the end. And all of a sudden, he's an idiot. Can't have it both ways. But from the Eagles' standpoint, they can, because they got away with it. Because fans don't know they were propping him up behind the scenes.
Right.
So all of a sudden, he's this fast rising, oh, how intelligent, how this guy's going to be a star in the coaching profession, into scapegoat. It's an ugly profession, man.
Yes, it is. This Nick Sirianni thing is interesting as well. Congrats to him. I do think he's earned every dollar he's going to earn. I think he's earned everything he's getting here with the success he's had. But I do wonder, at what point does this thing, is it not look so pretty? I don't know. I think it's due.
Wow, there's going to be that. I hate to bring it. There's going to be hiccups. This league is cyclical. Talent.
Yeah, there is. I just don't know at what point does a hiccup happen where a change is coming? I don't know. We'll see. John, last question on Sirianni, just for now, until we'll talk to Caden Steele later in the show. And I want to get into Joe Douglas here in the opening segment. But I want you to put yourself in Jeffrey Lurie's shoes for this answer. See if you can envision yourself as Jeffrey Lurie. What's Nick Sirianni worth to you, John?
What, money-wise?
Yeah. The whole deal. I mean, Andy Reid makes 20. Sean Payton makes 18. Sean McVay's down at 15.
He should be the highest paid coach in NFL history.
I said the same.
If it works like players, and that doesn't mean he's the best coach.
Now, if you were the owner, is that what you would do?
Yeah, Mike Florio wrote something, and Mike's a conspiracy theorist, but he is a lawyer, and he pointed out something good, so I'll give him the credit for it. There is some collusion amongst owners to keep coaching salaries down. So they don't have as much leverage as players, because a lot of people say, well, if Nick wanted to pull a Milton Williams and they were trying to lowball him from anything under 21, because I said, if I'm
Nick's agent, right? You're going for that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm starting at 21. So that's it. Nothing less than 21. And if the Eagles were trying, and I assume they were, because, why not save money when you can? Certainly possible. I would have done that. But that's why I bring up the point that Mike Florio made, where there's some collusion to keep. So you can't do what Milton Williams did and get an exorbitant amount of money somewhere else. Because they can keep it down better with the coaches.
Yeah, right.
So
it's not like quarterbacks where every time there's a new quarterback, they're the highest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's part of it. And we'll see where it comes in. Like I said,
now, Nick might be the one exception to that rule, John. 4 years, 2 Super Bowl appearances, 2 times NFC champion, 1 Super Bowl win. I mean,
but what I'm saying is, like, your dad asked me, is he going to get $25 million? I said, no, he's not. No. Because they don't have to give him $25 million. If he was a player, he can get $25 million. If you want, in theory, if you want to bet on yourself and he's got a good team again, and who knows if they win the Super Bowl again, could you imagine? But it doesn't work like players. And they have been able to successfully keep it down a little bit. And there's nobody who's going to go out there and just give them the, break the bank and go up $5 million on a coaching contract.
Right.
So it's a little bit different, but I'm also of the belief that the talent is far more important than the coaching. And I always say that, and I stand on that. And to Nick's credit, Nick will tell you show me a good coach and I'll show you a bunch of good players.
Yeah.
You
No,
can't
Nick definitely
win.
fits in with this organization, though, John. He definitely gives them, he tells them what they want to hear. You can tell.
Yeah, well, he's very politically savvy, like I
Yes,
said.
he is.
And he does seem to have a much better pulse on keeping Jeffrey and Howie happy than Doug Peterson did, at least later. When Doug won the Super Bowl, and rightfully so, I think he was like, all right, I should get more rope, right? And I agreed with him, but they don't necessarily feel that way. And interesting, what I think this has been reported maybe a couple times, but I don't think a lot of people know this. Like, Nick doesn't report to Howie Roseman. He reports directly to
Right.
Jeffrey Lurie. So I don't think a lot of people know that. So he's not some ficus plan as he was once
Yeah,
described.
it's
That
not
was
owner,
Doug.
GM,
That was Doug.
coach. It's
Yeah,
owner, GM reports to the owner, and the coach reports to the owner. They're two
exactly.
separate branches, right?
Exactly. So I don't think a lot of people know that, but that's the case. And they work well together. Howie and Nick work well together, which is also because some people have had difficulty in the past working with Howie.
Yeah, well, Nick, again, is political, and he laughs at Howie's dumb jokes, and Howie likes it, and they get along well. No, I'm just kidding. All right, John, I'm going to move into Joe Douglas here in this opening segment. We'll talk about him, but before I do that, I do get a hit. One of our great members dropped a big old super chat for us this morning. We appreciate it very much. Chris AM with $100 banger. Thank you so much, bro. That is big support of the channel and of the show. Thank you, Chris AM. He says, my boy Zander, happy late birthday. Thanks, man. My man, much love. This is for you. And congrats to your brother and his wife, your new niece. Much love to you and J-Mac. Always have you guys in high regard. You guys are the best. And salute Sirianni with his extension. Well-deserved. Love you all. Awesome, man. Thank you so much, Chris AM. And thank you for sending those well wishes for my brother and his wife. Make sure you send up a prayer for him, Chris. I know you're my brother in Christ. So thank you so much, brother. Appreciate that super chat. I'll get to all the other super chats here after the end of this opening segment here. And we got Caden Steele coming up in hour number 2 as well. John, let's talk Joe Douglas, man. Back. Joe Douglas has returned. You mentioned at the open, kind of failed in New York. Again, I don't know how much you want to put on Joe Douglas for that. I thought he brought in some nice talent. You're fighting an uphill battle trying to make things work with the Jets, with that owner and things like that. What are your thoughts on Joe Douglas returning to the Eagles, or to the Eagles front office to pair up with Howie Roseman once again?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great move from the Eagles' perspective. Great personnel guy, learned under Ozzie Newsome, one of the best GMs ever. People talk about Baltimore at all, harkens back to Ozzie Newsome. The personnel, the Eagles' whole grading system, it goes back to Baltimore. They still use it. It goes back to Ozzie Newsome. Everything they do is based on what Baltimore has done. So he's a great personnel guy. GM's a different job. It's like I say with head coach. It's like a coordinator versus a head coach from the perspective of it's a really, really big job. You're dealing with football operations. You're dealing with scouts. Joe's a scout, man, and that's what he does well. And that's what he'll be doing here. He doesn't have to do the other stuff that he did with the Jets. So to me, it doesn't matter what he did as a GM with the Jets. And it is much more difficult. Even Howie would have a far more difficult time doing his job with the Jets, which was, his favorite team growing up. But they're a disaster, and it's very difficult. But you see some of his drafts, not bad. Some pretty good players. And he was a big part of building the 2017 Super Bowl roster, the 2018 draft, what everyone talks about, the Jordan Mailata, Dallas Goedert draft. They only had 5 picks, but they all hit. That's Joe Douglas leading the personnel department. He brought in Andy Waddle, he brought in Ian Cunningham, guys who are gone on to much bigger jobs around the league. Yeah, I don't see any way it hurts.
You don't see any sort of power grab, not power grab. That's not the right word. You remember when you kind of discussed Nick Sirianni and Kellen Moore, and you said you didn't like the setup because you didn't know kind of, who was going to have the most power in the room. Do you see anything? Now, I know obviously it's going to be Howie, but you bring Joe Douglas in. He was kind of a big name GM. He was here for a little bit. You don't see any of that happening here with these two, do you?
No, the difference is Nick didn't set it up. Howie's setting it up.
Right.
And Howie and Joe are good friends. So, I mean, they already have Dave Caldwell as a former GM, Matt Russell, who's a former de facto GM. It's part of the success they do have. And I imagine Joe will fit in that role, similar to those guys, senior executive assistant to the GM, basically a sounding board. What the problem becomes, Joe's job last time he was here was vice president of player personnel. So he was in charge of running the day-to-day of the personnel department. Right now they have two VPs of player personnel, Chuck Walzell and Wool King. That, what do you want to do there? Do you want to put Joe back in that spot and kick those guys down? That might be a problem, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to be in the Dave Caldwell role, consigliere, former GM who's already here. So just another smart personnel guy. And that's how the Eagles build it, because they know they're going to lose personnel guys as they have.
Wonder if Joe Douglas will be a guy who's, up for another GM job in the future. I don't know if that will be the case or not, but, back in Philly, I think it's a good place to come after you get fired, to try and, I don't know if he needs a rehab of his reputation, but a little bit won't hurt. So good stuff there. John, you did lose a couple of the front office guys, so I'm sure they'll do more adding at the front office, but this is a pretty big addition to kind of make up for some of those losses there, right?
Yeah, you still need Jordan Dizon was a boots on the ground guy, national scout, so they have to replace him.
Meaning like he goes to places to scout players, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, well, everybody does, but he does it full time. Like occasionally,
gotcha.
Even Howie will go out and watch somebody, usually.
Oh, right, for the right players. But, you hear we had, I forget who the guy we had on this, like, they had a bunch of guys at Rutgers, and all these different pro days and all those things. Those are the guys.
Everybody goes out, especially if it's close at times, but these are full time. The scouts are full time on the road.
Right. Gotcha.
And so they have to replace him. Brandon Hunt, again, the wording may be different, but he's more of the pro side. So if you want to make the comp, that would be the closest to Joe, but Joe's obviously at a higher level. But Brent, not now in Las Vegas. Brandon got a promotion. That's part of the reason he left. And then Anthony Patch is more on the college side. So from what I understand, Ryan Myers, who was his assistant, is probably going to get promoted to replace him. But yeah, they lost 3 bodies, so they'll probably add a couple bodies as well.
Yeah, good stuff there. Appreciate everybody for being here this morning. We got a great crowd in here. I once again want to thank our man Chris AM. A big old super chat. Your guys' super chats go a long way at helping support the show. So thank you so much, Chris AM. We're going to get to all the other super chats as well. Don't forget to hit the like button this morning. We're going to talk to Caden Steele coming up at 9:20. And Caden did confirm with me, John, this morning via email. So I'm assuming Caden will be good. We're not going to beat him up for missing on us last week. So we're looking forward to talking to him. We appreciate everybody for being here this morning. Our tax is in here. Anthony Lear, James Jones, Killer Tomato, Abe, Cody K. Appreciate each and every one of you guys.
Oh, I should mention, by the way, because we got bogged down. Nick's talking today. So Nick Sirianni.
Oh, shoot, is he? Are you going down there or just Zoom?
No, I'm going down there this afternoon, 12:45-ish. Some players are going to talk to. Jalen Hurts is going to talk. So some news will be coming today, later this afternoon.
Is that something that the viewers should tune in on, or what? I mean, what do you mean news coming today?
No, just players are talking. So hopefully,
just action. Just there's some action.
Yeah, just some action.
All right, good stuff there. So looking forward to that. John, did you say what time that was? Sorry, I was
12:45-ish.
okay.
It's always
So we'll be
fluid.
There we go. We'll be seeing that. Life with Trucker CEO checks in. What's up, brother? Appreciate it. He says, when J Mac talks about the birds, I listen. That's a smart man right there, Johnny Mac.
Yeah, I know a little bit about the team.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate the super chat, Life.
Yeah.
Good stuff there. Cody K upgrades to a legend member. Cody K, thank you, brother. I appreciate it, man. One of our best viewers here, Cody K. We appreciate that very much. Killer Tomato becomes a member. Thank you, Killer Tomato. I like that nickname. How's that? Killer Tomato. That's a good one. Thank you for becoming a member, brother. Tanner checks in with a member chat. Member for 7 months. Thank you, sir, for the support. He says, seen a list from PFF yesterday, top 10 players under 25, and Jalen Carter wasn't on that list.
Yeah,
I don't understand.
about it. We
talked about that yesterday, Tanner, on the
17th.
show.
Yeah, I don't agree with that, but you know, it is.
That's crazy. I mean, how is he not a top 5?
It's an analytics site. They're basing it off grades, film grades. And again, you know, if you understand what PFF is, it's really valuable. But you have to understand what it is.
Right.
Like, all things are not created equal. Like, Milton Williams was the #1 interior pass rusher in pro football last year, and he probably was from a analytics standpoint. But one of the major reasons he was is because everybody's paying attention to Jalen Carter, and he's getting a lot of one-on-ones, which he will learn it's not going to be the same in New England. So there's all these layers to football. I talk about it all the time. That's why it frustrates me to no end when people boil things down to just complete and utter bullshit. And that's, you know, PFF does a good job, but there's limitations. And unless you understand, you know, how teams are attacking you, and with the case of the Philadelphia Eagles, and for years it was, like I said, when we used to do conference calls with opposing coaches, I say it all the time. When it was an offensive coach, all they talked about was 90. But coaches like to talk in numbers. 91 and 55, 91 and 55, 91 and 55. That's who they game plan for. Now they game plan for Jalen Carter. That's who they're worried about. That's who they're trying to manipulate. That's who they have to worry about first. And other guys have great seasons because of all the attention Jalen Carter gets. But if you just look at the film, you know, it's tough to beat a double team. It's tough to, you know, beat a chip block and coming on.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes you get graded on a play because they've handled you. And you know, Jalen Carter has the ability to reach a level that we haven't seen in Philadelphia for a very long time. A very long time. And Fletcher Cox is a borderline Hall of Fame player, but he's got more potential than Fletcher Cox.
I'm with you. Good stuff there, Johnny Mac. Great stuff. We got a lot of good super chats today. D Hughes checking in. What's up, D Hughes? Hope you're doing good, brother. He says, taking pushing out is good for the game. Eagles will be just as successful on the sneak without it, and you won't have plays that cause Devontae to miss games because of something preventable, i.e. the Saints hit. There you go. It's a good, not a bad take there, because you remember that play that Devontae was getting pushed.
Well, one of the things I think also modern fans don't realize, and I talk about it all the time, like they used to stop plays when forward momentum stopped. Like, you didn't get 3 opportunities to, stop, let me keep going. You know, the momentum stopped, they blew the whistle. They stopped the play for years and years and years. And it was better. From an aesthetic standpoint, the game was better. Now, I'm not saying the game has gotten uglier because there are far more the safety issues have created that far more than anything involving pushing. So there's a bunch of reasons that the game has gotten less entertaining. And that's lower on the list, but it is part of it. And what's strange, the push at the college level, and I have to look it up, the timing, because right there, the NFL should say, we don't want this when that play happens. And they just pushed him into the end zone after he was stopped. Like I was said, in the old days, he was completely stoned, Matt Leinart, from a forward momentum standpoint. In the old days, the whistles would have blown, and that would have been it. And the game would have been over. But they let the play go for an extended amount of time. Reggie Bush comes up, pushes him into the end zone. Big game at the time. I think USC was ranked number 1. And they ended up, and that's the most famous tush push of all. Long before the tush push existed was the Bush push, which was a 2005 game between USC and Notre Dame. So big, high-profile game. Same year, the NFL removed it. I'm like, what are you doing? And it took a while, but in came the issues. And they don't want it. And now they got to take it back out of the game. And now it's up to Roger Goodell, because he's the one who doesn't want it, to get 24 votes.
Right.
You're not getting 24 votes the way Green Bay worded the proposal, because it did signal, it was only about one play.
Right. It singled out the Eagles. It didn't make sense for the game as a whole.
Exactly. And it was never going to pass, and it didn't pass, or wouldn't have passed. It never came up to a vote because they knew it wouldn't pass. It was 16-16. And they had to shift it. And this is what Roger wanted anyway, to remove pushing as a whole from the game.
Yeah, and if you've heard, John, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, Roger Goodell in any podcast or show. I think he was on a couple. I think it was McAfee. Like he wants this. He wants this out. You can tell when he talks. Yeah.
Yeah. But, Roger has been around for a while. Shouldn't have put it in. There was no need. For 85 years, it did not exist. You were not allowed to push. And people think 18 years is like, oh my God, what will happen to the game?
Yeah, right. I wonder what the context of it being added was. I obviously don't know. You might.
Yeah, they said it was too difficult to officiate down the field. And that to me was about officials at the time. Remember when replay came into the game, and it made officials much more skittish.
Right.
Plus, they get a lot of shit. So they're estimating, like, what are you throwing more shit on us? We got to do this. We got to do that. But again, there's always unintended consequences to these things. So they didn't envision what it would do. They didn't envision that, oh, we're not going to blow the whistle, and we're just going to let the play go, and we're going to push for 30 seconds as opposed to stopping forward momentum. All these unintended consequences. So, and by no means am I saying the tush push didn't accelerate it, because it did. If the tush push didn't exist, it would have been, yeah, right.
We might not be having we probably wouldn't be having this conversation right now. Yeah.
It would have been not that big of a deal either way. It should be out. A few people like me had a problem with the forward momentum thing, but not enough to, and I'm not going to go screaming from the from the Empire State Building like some of these weirdos. I just said it's stupid. It's stupid. You should blow the whistle. But that would have been it. So I'm not trying to say it didn't accelerate. It certainly did. But yeah, I think if you're being honest, and pushing shouldn't be involved in the game.
JD3 says, our future all-pro fullback, Harrison Bryant, doesn't need pushing. Fullback dive with Bryant will be even more deadly. So we have now made Harrison Bryant not only an all-pro tight end, but an all-pro fullback, Johnny.
Well, JJ's got to move his position because he knows he's in trouble.
I think you're right. JD, called out.
Yeah, they're not going to use the fullback enough. They might use it more, 5-10 times a game, which is more. But yeah, I wouldn't. He's got to beat out Ben Van Sumeren first to be the fullback.
Yeah. And Ben's going to be good at that. Umberto checking in. What's up, brother? He says, Eagles still have an advantage on the QB sneak without pushing. Jalen is the strongest QB with the best leg drive in the NFL. Other teams don't have that. Sounds like a Birds 365 listener right there, Johnny.
Yeah, I've been saying it for years. It doesn't matter. They were better before. But statistically, now they used it more, but not a lot. People overrate how much they use it.
I will say, I think that's something to watch. Like, what instances are they willing to use it? Are they as willing to use it if it gets, outlawed versus what they were willing to do last year?
What they're not going to do is just hand the football off to Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, right. Because that doesn't make sense.
They're going to use the quarterback sneak quite a bit. But again, I think, if you do it correctly, and I think the Eagles will do it correctly. I was saying it last year before this even came up, because teams were adjusting and loading up, trying to sell out right in front of the center and guards. And you saw some offsides. You saw some guys jumping early. At that point, I said, you know what? They should just spread them out and just let Jalen pick the hole and go. If you spread out five guys,
right,
you have to respect it, because it's AJ Brown, it's Devontae Smith, it's Saquon Barkley, it's Dallas Goedert, etc. It's not like you can not put cornerbacks on them. So all of a sudden there's a lighter box, and who's going to stop Jalen Hurts? And it's
right.
To his point of his, 600-pound squat and his strength. And that's why they were more successful in 2021 with the traditional quarterback sneak than they were last year with the tush push.
Good stuff. Tush says, Wildcat coming back. Interesting comment there. I doubt it, but I'd like to comment anyway. Suo Blaze checking in. What's up, Suo? He says, so if a running back gets stuffed at the line and his linemen push him to get the first or touchdown, can't do that then either. Same shit, going to ruin the game. Wow, Suo, not liking this one.
Yeah, Suo, the game existed before 2005. It was fine. Trust me, it was fine. Nobody talked about it. It was completely fine. In fact, most people will tell you it was a hell of a lot more entertaining in the 90s.
Well, that's not all attributed to pushing, but yeah.
No.
Yeah.
My point is the game was fine.
Right, and the game was very entertaining then too.
Yes. Nobody complained about it. Nobody. They didn't change this rule because people were complaining about it. They changed the rule because officials were complaining about it, because they were skittish about getting shit. That's why they changed the rule. It had been that way for years. And there were some pretty good running backs to the people, because I saw what Zander was pointing out, the Adrian Peterson stuff and blah, blah, blah. And by the way, Adrian didn't need too many people to push him.
No,
he
didn't.
But occasionally. Jim Brown and Walter Payton and et cetera, they all, guess what? Couldn't push.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's good context from you, John. Appreciate it. Suo Blaze, good stuff, brother. Thank you, everybody, for the super chats. One more here, then we'll get to a break. We got Caden Steele coming up. Rich Nutt checking in. What's up, Rich? He says, given the contract with time past now, how do you explain the collapse of 2023? Rich, that is a loaded question, my friend.
Yeah, it's tough. Look, I think the biggest mistake was moving away from Sean Desai to Matt Patricia. You know, some of the playoff, there's increments. They had games I think people forget because, again, everything gets revised. There were games that they were pretty successful offensively down the stretch of that season. The Arizona game, they moved the football. One of the Giants games, I think they moved the football very well. So it wasn't like they were a disaster offensively the entire time. They got blown out by San Francisco and Dallas. Now, I do think those two games sort of shook them to their core and said, all right, we're not as good as those teams at that time. So I do think that was part of it. Then you had they lost that game in Seattle. Bad decision by Jalen Hurts. They should have won that game. I think that changes things. The Arizona game, they lost 35-31. Again, moved the football pretty well, but they lost that game because the defense collapsed. If they win that game, and then the Giants game at the end didn't matter, but people forget who got hurt in that game. Like that crippled them in the playoffs. AJ, Reed Blankenship,
Right.
that crippled them in the playoffs to a certain extent. They played very poorly. So I think if you look at it and break it down individually, they had some decent games. They played okay in Seattle. They lost the game because, again, that was when they won off script, AJ and Jalen. Bad throw from Jalen, interception, lose the game. They beat the Giants the first game, scored 33 points. Again, it's the Giants. They stink. They scored 31 points. Now, 7 of it was a pick 6 by Sidney Brown, but still, they moved the football pretty well. And then the Giants game, nobody's pretty much, they pulled people anyway, and certainly after AJ got hurt. So there were pockets of decent offensive play. The defense, again, they were 8-1. Now that I have it pulled up, they were 8-1 when the bye week came, and that's when they first started considering taking the defensive play calling away from Sean Desai at 8-1, which is just batshit crazy. But that's what the expectations were that year. And they were like, oh man, they knew they were not as good as they looked on paper. And ironically, they came out of the bye and they beat Kansas City on the road. And they beat Buffalo in that exciting overtime game. And they're 10-1 when San Francisco came in and just beat the brakes off them. And they panicked. It's, why? I don't know. Because if anything, and it's intangible, but they collapsed under the expectations. They knew they weren't good. Even at 10-1, they weren't really a 10-1 team.
Right. They knew it and it ate them alive. Do you agree with this comment here? Curtis says it looked the same the first 4 games of 24.
Yeah, for the most part. Not well, no. I mean, defensively, they were clearly better. And
They did have their problems defensively, though, in those first 4 games.
Sure.
They figured it out, yeah.
But
remember what the commentary was like, John, after that Tampa game. Nobody thought we were going to the Super Bowl at that point, including every single person in this chat. And I don't want to hear from any of them saying they were.
Well, here's the difference is, and I always go back, and Martin Frank, because I was there with him sitting, he can confirm this. The Eagles during the 2023 training camp. But for what they went over to Lincoln Financial Field to practice one day to practice basically the communication between the coaches, and they took it over to Lincoln Financial Field. And we just happened to be watching, and I didn't think much of it at the time. I kind of chuckled. It was more of a funny situation where they were running drills, and Howie was on the field, and Sean wasn't paying attention, and he was trying to get his attention because they had the wrong personnel grouping on the field. And, Nick was trying to get his attention. Howie was trying to get his attention, and he was doing something else. And it just looked bad. It just looked bad. That don't happen with Big Fangio. Nobody questions Big Fangio. Nobody. Not the players, not the coaches, not the head coach, not the GM, not the owner. So
Even
right
when
off the
things
bat,
weren't going well.
You could see the difference when it came to preparation,
Right.
and just that. Now, if you don't have talent, and Big's not a miracle worker, but whatever his group is, they're going to be prepared. They might not be good enough, but they're going to be prepared. So right off the bat, things were different from a defensive standpoint. Did they grow during the season? Yes. Unquestionably. I mean, by the end of the season, they were just off the charts, making plays every week. Again, stopping one of the greatest offensive teams. They didn't let him cross the 50-yard line in 9 drives. Speaks for itself. But that was a growing process throughout the year. So, and then offensively, I mean, you can make a strong argument they had a better passing game in 2023 than 2024. Now, obviously, because of Saquon's presence, the running game was much better. So there was a give and take offensively. But it wasn't much difference. They were number 8 in 2023, number 8 in 2024. They were just better at passing in 2023, better at running in 2024. The big shift forward was defensively. And defensively, it was evident very, very early that they were going to be more prepared and better coached. And so it was different.
Good stuff there. Frank from Philly becomes a YouTube member. Thank you so much, Frank from Philly. Appreciate that, brother. Hope you're doing well. Good to have you back in the mix here on JAKIB Sports. Johnny Mac, great show so far today, man. Big topics here on the offseason. Always good to get some good, fresh topics. We got the Tush Push vote, or, probably coming tomorrow. They're supposed to vote on the Olympic thing too, John, so we'll see about that. I'm sure they'll let that through, right? They want
that's bad too, by the way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we talked about that. They might be opening up a can of worms that they don't want to open up, but we'll see how that all shakes out. Appreciate everybody for being in here today. Again, thank you, Frank from Philly, and thanks to all of our great super chatters today. We got Caden Steele coming up in about 8 minutes or 7 minutes here on Birds 365. So pretty good stuff from